Hey, good afternoon. Scott Lang here with Visionary Philanthropic Consulting and my dear friend and partner, Jason Blumenthal.
Good
Um,
afternoon.
Glad you're here with us because today we're going to be talking about the wonderful, exciting world of prospect research. It's the basis of where we start every client engagement, actually, to get a better understanding of their philanthropic landscape and also a better sense of who their current donors are and who their potential donors, or as we like to put it, investors could be going forward. So, why don't I take a back seat, let Jason drive the bus and share his screen? And at any time, if any of you have a question or a comment, please just put that in the chat and we'll get started right now.
Hello, everyone. I am Jason Blumenthal. There's my bio. You don't have to read it. Basically, what it says is I've been doing this for 30 plus years. Work with not-for-profits and with ultra-high net worth individuals and families, helping them figure out their philanthropy and what matters to them and stuff like that. That's the technical term. What we're going to talk about is prospect research and why do we do prospect research? Like Scott said, it's the basis for everything we do, right? We do it to figure out how much a donor or potential donor can give, why they may give, how best to connect with them. That's on the individual side. We also do it to have accurate analytics from your CRM and your database, right? Knowing how much capacity you have is critical. How do you segment it? How do you prioritize? Can we do this campaign with who we have? But the analytics are only as good as the research. Accurate, it's critical. Recently, we had a client, just as an example, right, who Scott, they had what, $800 million. They had hired another consultant, lovely group, and the consultant came up with $800 million. And then they hired us to do major donor research and put together portfolios and packets on how to really engage. Scott, what did you and I spend on the analytics? Because we decided we needed to rerun it.
Yeah, I think to be clear, what had happened was
Yeah,
the other group had run the donor file, constituent file, through one of the premier well screening tools, and came up as Jason said, the executive summary said there was $800 million in philanthropic potential. Uh, they got the file to us, and we started to do our uh, Q&A on the file and discovered that there were duplicate records. Um, the data came out of a system that indicated if you had more than one email address, you got a second line of the same
that's
person.
right.
And the only thing that was different was the email.
Yep,
So, in other words, they spent more money on screening than necessary because at 20 cents a clip, that adds up. So we took the file down from, I think it was 15,000 to about 8,900 records, screened that. And then when the results came in, again, Jason and I spent time looking behind the scene. Jason likes to look at people um, on the borderline in terms of proclivity. And I like to start at the top with the people who have the most wealth capacity. And so we work toward the middle.
yep.
But that's where we got them close to what it was, a billion, one or two in total.
One
That's
Yeah,
it.
one almost, yeah, 1.25 billion. They went from 800 million to 1.25 just by doing the basic research and cleaning up. There were a lot of things where they had the person's nickname in on the first as the first name, CJ. Well, the well screening software doesn't know that CJ is, Charles. It- they had not the addresses. A lot of addresses were business addresses, not home addresses. So they hadn't done the research, so they didn't get accurate analytics to figure out what they could do. Uh, that's why it's important. Going through the DS3s or the 1-1s or unable to rates, whatever your system calls it, and looking and seeing, right? So you do it to figure out what they can give, why they would give for accurate analytics. You do it to look at connections, who they're connected to. You also want to learn their language in the prospect research. And what I mean the language is, what do they care about? If you learn that they're totally into sports, then when you talk to them, use sports analogies, things like that. They matter. Uh, you know, the software is important, but it is not the be all and end all. iWave, Donor Search, Blackbaud, most of you are probably using it, not always. You can't just, even if you do the research and you get everything right, you can't just run it, dump it in there, and say, we've done it. This is fluid. Things change. Liquidity events happen. You should be looking often. You should be running often. These software companies don't differentiate between junior, the third, parents and children using the same household. They might have moved out. So this is why you need to rerun these things. Properties can be in LLCs or trusts. Closely private held businesses aren't going to come up. If they're using a donor advised fund or a foundation that hasn't been connected to them in an annual report. So again, important, but it is not and cannot be your only tool for prospect research. It only uses the data that you put into it. And like Scott said, a lot of times that isn't so accurate, sorry. And it only uses the data publicly available on the internet. And nothing's ever wrong on the internet, so we don't have to worry about that. Um, Property is a key indicator of somebody's wealth. But even that is not 100% accurate. Again, it could be in a trust, it could be in an LLC, so it may not be tied to them. Or they could have inherited the house from their grandparents. And it might be a $5 million house, but they don't have $5 million. So you have to go in, do the research. You have to go in, and one of the things that Scott and I spend a lot of time doing is actually matching the properties. Your CRM says they live at 123 Main Street. iWave, Donor Search, whatever, didn't connect it to them because it's in a trust or an LLC. So it doesn't include that in their giving, and it doesn't necessarily include gifts that came from that address in their giving. So you have to take the time and go in and say, nope, we know that's right, and do it and refresh. Little things like that. So you've run it, you've done it, a few little tricks you can do in your CRM. Go ahead and filter or sort your database by the highest net worth zip codes. Every community has the rich neighborhood. Just sort it. Look at those. Look and see, are those people that are giving well below their capacity? Then look and see, is their capacity showing much lower than what they're actually giving? Scott, talk about we just did this with a client. What? Their top 200 donors, I ran it this morning, 160 of them were giving more than what the capacity shows.
Yeah, and that's a nice feature in donor search. You can look at the giving, particularly giving by foundations, and then compare that, or giving through foundations, and then compare that with the rating. And oftentimes, what you find is there might be somebody who, as a friend of ours said, I'm a an FIP, meaning a formally important person. When he was working, he was a very important person because he was the CEO, but now he's retired. So they don't necessarily show up in the business database associated with the company that they used to work for, particularly if it's a large law firm or accounting firm where a lot of the dollars and revenue come in through the partnership year-end revenue sharing versus an SEC insider compensation. But always look at the dollars that have been given either to you or to others, and
Others, exactly.
compare that with the wealth rating, because oftentimes what you'll find is that there's some kind of a family foundation or a donor advised fund or some other asset that's available. And
Yeah,
one other thing to talk about, Jason, you're probably more schooled at this than others. Uh, if someone really wants to hide their wealth, they can. I mean, I had a
yeah.
friend who owned 12 radio stations along the Canadian US border, and each radio station was a separate corporation. He had an office in a building on his property. He bought an old farm, and so there was an outbuilding, a cabin, if you will. He brought in 12 individual phone lines, each as a private, unregistered personal number, not a business line, and did everything he could to hide his wealth. You'd have to do a lot of research to find who owned which
That's
of those companies and tie them all to him, and
that's
that
right.
happens more often than not.
High net worth people, when I'm working with my high net worth clients, a fair amount of what I'm doing is that. I have a client who gives millions and millions of dollars a year away across the country. If their family's name is associated with that gift, they will never give to them again. It has to be the most anonymous ever. I had to make a call to a university a couple of years ago saying, please cancel that gift. Why? Because you recognized the family in a newsletter. No means no. They don't want to do it. I spend a fair amount of my time really doing the research. We had one last year looking at their list. They had a donor was giving consistently $1,000 to $2,000 a year. It wasn't enough for them to be considered major. This is a medium-sized not-for-profit. They didn't use wealth screening software. They thought they knew it themselves. Gave us their list, 5,000 people on there, scrolling through. My job is to know these things like Scott was talking about. This name pops out. They're multi-billionaires. They have $1,000 to $2,000 a year. Immediately flag them. We're on our call. Say, what type of research have you done? Has the CEO scheduled lunch with them? And the response was, well, they just give up $1,000 a year. They're billionaires. What? And we send them going and said, well, I don't see anything. I said, that's because that's the granddaughter. Their family owns one of the three largest hotel chains in the world. The granddaughter doesn't have that name, but the granddaughter has access to that wealth. And the only time people talk to the granddaughter is when they're trying to get access to the parents and grandparents. They're clearly engaged because they give you money even though you don't reach out to them. This needs to be immediate coffee and not getting access to the parents or the grandparents. It's, we love you. We want to work with you and building that. So if somebody really, really, really wants to hide their stuff, it's pretty hard to find. In most cases, I can, but I've been doing this a long time. But there are tools that you can use and you should be using. You should be jumping onto these sites before every single meeting that your major gifts, your transformative gifts, your CEO is going to have, because you need to know what they're posting about, what they're talking about, what's going on in their life, looking for life changes, where they went to school. Oh, they're really interested in gardening. Right, LinkedIn, we all know what LinkedIn does. Google, again, not 100% accurate, but it gives you a way. Look in newspapers. They still exist. People still post things. You still use news. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. People like to talk about themselves and share. Look at state business registries. Pull their name up. Go do a search in the Secretary of State. Property records. Every single county in the United States now has a GIS. Through the GIS, you can search either by name and or address. If it's in a trust, that will show up. The trust has to have an address associated with it. You can then search. It may take 2 or 3 steps, but if you work hard enough, you can tie it together. Quick side note, I got one of my largest billionaire clients on our 3rd meeting was, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. We're talking. And about 5 minutes into the call, I mentioned to them, I say, oh, I see you have a Gulfstream G550. My parents and brothers and sisters don't even know that. How? Well, you mentioned, I know where you live, and I know you mentioned that you had just traveled to your other house yesterday. I just went into the FAA. You can get flight plans. I looked at all the flight plans that left from this place, went to this place. He said, yeah, but the airplane's not in my name. I said, right, but there are only so many private planes that do it. So while we were talking, I looked up the ownership. Yeah, but it's not in my name. I said, it is not. But the PO box you used to register it, your spouse used that PO box in something else. So when I just Googled that PO box, her name came up. Right? So you can find it. FEC, Edgar, it's a big, brutal website, the SEC one, but it will tell you any major stock transactions, 15% or more, or if the person has ownership. And it's pretty much real time. So liquidity event, they just sold 20,000 shares or 100,000 shares. It's good to know. It's good to know where they went to school, because all of these things help you learn about the person, what their motivation will be. And again, the spider webbing. Oh, they went to this school. Well, a champion on our board also went to that school, right? It gives you these connections. So let's talk about AI for a second. It's a research assistant. I don't like to read things that are on the screen, but I'm reading this. It is a terrible fact checker. Worse than useless. In preparation for this call, I went on to one of the AIs, and I'm based in Minneapolis, and I said, what 5 individuals gave the most money philanthropically in the Twin Cities in the last 5 years? And it said number 1 by far is Mackenzie Scott. No, she's not. No. Glenn Taylor gave almost $200 million in the last couple of years. The Andersons gave almost $200 million. So I said, Please tell me how you came to that conclusion. Well, Mackenzie Scott has been the largest donor in the United States. So, and then it basically explains to me why it's wrong. Then I asked it, we're going to build a pediatric research facility in the Twin Cities. Who would be individuals and only individuals that could make a transformative gift of more than $5 million? It said, I would strongly suggest you first look at the Cargill McMillan family. I'm reading actually from the screen. Why would you suggest that? That would be due to their strong connection to the University of Minnesota and the Mayo Clinic. Both have pediatric and research focuses. Please give me specific examples of transformative gifts Annie McMillan or Cargill has made to the University of Minnesota or the Mayo Clinic. AI. Oh, great catch. I do not see any gifts from the Cargill or McMillan family to the University of Minnesota or Mayo Clinic. But you just, okay. Said, however, take a look at the Margaret Cargill Foundation and the McKnight Foundation, both which have very strong connections to the McMillan Cargill family. Now, the McKnight Foundation is 3M, one of the 3M founding families. It's not Cargill. And the Margaret Cargill Foundation, I asked for individuals, and Margaret Cargill died 20 years ago, had no heirs, and has nothing to do with Cargill or the family. I give you 20 more examples, but really what it boils down to is you cannot trust AI. You can bounce ideas off of it. You can do, help me tailor this note, knowing that I know this, but you cannot trust it. Also, another big, huge caveat in this, unless you are using a firewalled internal AI system, and even then, if you put your list of donors into AI, you put your database in there, you say, this person, here's their ID number, here's how much they've been giving, what can they do? Or here's a list of 1,000 people that they've, given. What are your thoughts? You have now set that information out into the world. And I now have access to that. Every other not-for-profit has access to that. Every single person in the world now has access to that information. You've now given the world that person's address, how much they've given to you, whatever is in that spreadsheet, that's now out in the wild. Big reason why pretty much everyone needs to have cybersecurity and insurance and things like that, because don't do that. Just don't do it.
That's
Yeah,
two good points, Jason. And relative to the AI one, we last year were preparing for the giving.
yeah, it's a great example.
And Jason asked the question, give me the results of the 2025 report, knowing full well that it was embargoed, right? No member of the Giving Institute is to let any of that information out until the public date, which usually is like the latter part of third week of June. So up at Rumbles, here's how much was given. Here are the the beneficiaries and the percentages, et cetera, et cetera. And Jason looked at it and said, I think these are last year's numbers. And again, asked it to fact check. And in fact, the AI tool said, oh, you're right. This is from 2024, not 2025. Yeah.
Oh, good catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing you admonished me about, Jason, was after any question to AI, you should always include the AI tool to cite the primary source. Where'd you get the information? And provide a hyperlink. And then secondly, allow the AI tool to ask you 2 or 3 follow-up questions.
Always.
For clarification.
Always. Yes. We use internally, we use software which allows us to link to multiple AIs and share, and I have a macro built in that every time I ask it a question, it then automatically verify your source, confirm your data, because it just guesses on formulas and just makes estimates unless you tell it not to. And then, verify, cite your source, and ask me 3 questions that will help get a more accurate result. And it helps, but it's getting its data from the internet. Sometimes it will cite Wikipedia, right? And I'll say, great, show me the hyperlink where Wikipedia is citing that information. And then it will be Reddit. And it will be, some dude that said, I heard that. And then all these other people, yeah, I heard that too. No, that's not data. So there is one source that's not 100% accurate, but it is far and away the most accurate for prospect research, to get to analytics, to do your spider webbing, to learn the language to speak, to gather the information. And it's the one that unfortunately now gets overlooked and forgotten. And that's asking the donor. Pick up the phone and call them, schedule a coffee. Do it. You want to have as much data as you can in advance. But you know what you do? You ask them, at least 2 or 3 times a week. I get a call from a client or from somebody. Hey, do you know, is this person still working at wherever? Or are they still doing this? Or is their kid still at, and within 15 minutes, excuse me, I'll email them back and give them an answer. You know how I find out? Pick up the phone and call someone. Conversations give the answer. If you are doing a good conversation, the other person is speaking at least 80% of the time. You're prompting them, but then you need to listen to them. If you are at their house, you need to look at the pictures on the wall. That's going to tell you a huge picture. You need to look at the landscaping. You need to see what they're sitting. You need to see what they're talking about. And you actually need to listen. You need to know what they're eating. You need to gather this data. I get passionate about it because that's how you figure things out. With our clients, a lot of times, we'll actually put together a list of questions. Now, the worst thing you can do is sit there and ask them questions like you're at a mall doing a survey. But these are things that you want to hit and you want to lead the conversation to. When you leave that meeting, every meeting is a first meeting to a qualified meeting in essence, because it's when you leave the meeting, you should know, are they interested in getting more information, becoming more involved? You can ask them. I see you've been, giving for 5 years. I know you went to the event 2 years ago. What did you think? Who brought you? We'd love to be able to talk to you more about it. Share more. Ask them. It's better than any database. It's better than AI. It's better than well screening. But you put those all together, and that's how you get this packet that tells you, are they a transformative gift person? Are they this? Are they that? Are they somebody that we should be talking about inherited wealth to the next generation? Do we need to start bringing their kids in? Are they somebody that may be interested in a legacy gift? You don't have to be direct. You don't have to be manipulative. You talk to them, you listen to them. You combine that with the data you've learned from the other prospect research, and you're able to put together a portfolio that is just knock it out of the park.
I'll give a
Right?
shout out to a prospect researcher I worked with years ago, Dee Dee McGovern. She was at Manhattan College, and they were a gifted memory client. And she would produce a research profile out of the system and then highlight the areas where they had no information. And
Yep.
she would turn to the vice president, Dr. Lerner, and say, Larry, when you go out and visit with this person for lunch, we know they have two children, but could you subtly ask their names,
Yeah.
and find out what they do? Like, oh, I've got a son and a daughter, Stacy and Chris. Stacy's really interested in soccer, and Chris is trying out for the football team. Whatever, and then come back. She would routinely ask him to ask questions that would help build their background and
Exactly.
interest. Yeah, and then they could predicate on that, gathering that information. They could fill out the system and have a better platform from which to determine how best to engage the individual going forward. But
Yeah.
great point. Always,
No.
always consider talking to the prospect and
Yeah.
asking the question.
Just ask them. A few years ago, we were doing a feasibility study. The not-for-profit put someone on the list, said, you got to go interview them, you got to do this. We looked at everything they had in their research done, that trusted. Was for a pretty big capital campaign for the not-for-profit. Go over to his office. This was during COVID. He still wanted to do it in his office, but we separated, no problem. Sit down. Thank you so much for meeting. I look around. The office is covered in weapons and swords and knights of armor and stuff like that. I've got knights of armor in my office. Cool. All right. Do the initial thing. How did you get involved? Talk questions. Tell me about it. And the first thing he says is, now I should let you know I would never, ever give any money to a capital campaign. If not-for-profits can't run like business, I can't just go get a loan. So, why didn't we have the research and find out? You can find out if you ask them in the call. And we hadn't been involved at the beginning of this and been brought in. It's my fault for not doing more research. But we once had, I don't know if you remember this, Scott. I was talking to one of our not-for-profits, and they were having me give some training about it. They said, go onto Facebook, go onto LinkedIn, go onto Instagram, because you'll know about birthdays, you'll know about celebrations, you'll know about bad things that happen. And their prospect research person said, I would never do that. That's intrusive. That's disgusting. I was floored because it's sort of our job to know this. You're not being manipulative. You're not being sneaky. If somebody puts something on Facebook and it's public, it's the way it is. It's our job. And we don't always have to go out and buy marketing lists, right? If the person's been a volunteer, if they've shown up at an event, they've already shown there's something there. With the right research and asking the right questions and using the right tools, we can then either qualify them to move to the next level or know what their capacity is. We just have to take the time to identify these people. That is my presentation. If anybody has any questions, concerns,
Yeah,
I will.
thanks. Got a question here.
Yeah.
What was the biggest surprise gift you've ever been involved with that resulted from the intense research you do?
Oh boy, let me stop sharing because my facial expressions on this one are going to be. So we've had several. We've had more than several, actually. Using the right language. I'll give you an example of one which was the opposite. I sat in on an executive director making a pitch, and they didn't do the research to know that this person was a vegan and an devout animal rights activist. And they were talking about this person who was making the pitch was a hunter and used several references about getting the 10-pointer and things like that. And you could see from the body language, the person getting more. And even though they cared about the not-for-profit, it so turned them off. Doing research, we were able to find somebody to sit on a campaign committee where this person had made a gift many, many years ago. The database information was out of date. The contact information was out of date. The family are billionaires. And what the not-for-profit said is, unfortunately, we lost track of them and never followed up, and they were gone. So I took the time to do the research, and I'd like to say it was hard. It took about 5 minutes to find the person's email address and contact information because I found out that this person had been a member of a sorority. Sororities often have directories that they do not firewall or put behind security. So I was able to go into the sorority's website, was able to type in this person and find the person's new address, phone number, and email address. The not-for-profit reached out to that person, and that person was co-chairing the capital campaign, $1 billion campaign, or $200 million campaign. So that was a fun one.
We've got another question. Are people less open to phone calls?
No.
Or do you have to text them first?
So I had a call this morning with someone. I always ask, I say, how do you prefer? Do you want to be text? Do you want to do text? Do you want to be call? Do you want to do Zoom? As a research person, text is always the worst way to do it because you can't see body language, you can't see inflection, you can't see sarcasm. So you never, ever really want to, and you can't easily do the follow-up question. So many of these AI tools that not-for-profits are using where they send out the texts to do this stuff, it doesn't get inflection. It can't see the person leaning in. You can't see if they're really interested in. I always like to do a call. Scott, how many times have you heard me say over the years? Well, someone will say, what's the status of this? Did you reach out to the person? And they'll say, well, I sent them an email. I'll say, right. We didn't say email them. We said call them. Call them. First of all, it's much harder to say no in a phone call. And if they don't answer the phone, then they don't answer the phone. Then go to email and text. I think post-COVID, there's a fair amount of people that really miss communication and really miss actually talking. So I would not avoid the phone call. It's easier for us to just do a text, but the job isn't what's easier for us. The job is how can we get that connection?
So I often introduce the subject of a phone call either to a text message or an email to ask when they'd be available.
Yeah.
But then if there's no reply, I'll just pick up the phone, right? Because at the very worst, it'll go to voicemail, and I can leave a message.
Exactly. I corrected one from a not-for-profit yesterday. They sent me, here's what we're really excited about. We're going to send it. And I said, great, add one line at the end. What's that? I said, I will be following up with a phone call next week.
Yeah.
Really? I said, yeah. It's not their responsibility to respond to you.
Right.
It's your job to interact with them.
So one thing we ought to share, we're working with a client currently and they're active members in the you know Association for Prospect Research, and for geez, I'm going to use the word decades. Um, when we would build the uh, capacity models, we would take a look at political giving,
Yeah.
and we would say that because the gift to the political party, the candidate, the PAC um, was non-tax deductible, that donation could be worth 1.5 times the value in the form of an annual gift, right? So if somebody gave $1,000 to a senatorial campaign, they can make a $1,500 gift annual fund to your leadership annual fund club or whatever. Um, AARP, American Prospect Research Association, not the senior retirement club,
Right.
um, has admonished people from using
Correct.
the federal election data to calibrate or calculate giving. So in this case, the client doesn't even include it in what gets imported back into their system, like when you do the
Mhm.
ratings. Um,
Yeah.
so
And
I think that's something to which we should all be aware in the prospect research arena.
and I would counter with them, as I have countered with them. Fine, you don't want to include that in their capacity, but a good researcher better know if that person is a all-in 100% Democrat only or an all-in 100% Republican only, because that influences the language you use, that influences who you're going to send out, right?
Yeah, don't mix oil and vinegar, fire and water, whatever metaphor you want to use.
Exactly. Don't send the governor's son, who might be a champion of your not-for-profit, out to meet with someone who's the leading fundraiser on the opposite party and has consistently said bad things. Even if the not-for-profit is good, why start unless you can do it with, we disagree with this politically, however, we both love this not-for-profit. But you better do your research and be prepared for
Well,
that.
I want to give a shout out to one of our colleagues, another principal of the firm, Michael Shipham, who said, always ask about the artwork in their home or office.
Always.
It often leads to interesting discoveries.
Yeah.
And by example, um, when I was at the University of Missouri Columbia, making a call on a gentleman in the Boot Hill who had both a tree farm and a cattle ranch. The dean and I were there for dinner, and there was this beautiful black painted screen, accordion fold screen, um, in the sitting area, separating it from the next room. And I made a comment about it. I said, "Well, this is lovely. Where did you get this Oriental screen?" And the gentleman was old at the time. I think he was like 79, 81. He said, "Oh, yeah, that was a gift that President Hoover gave us on our hunt for our wedding present." Oh my God, President Hoover. Yeah. and
Mhm.
and then led into the story of how he got his initial start in life wealth wise, and that was the fact that his father was a guy, or his great grandfather was a guy by the name of Shaw, and he was an accountant and sold accounting books in addition to doing accounting. He met a guy by the name of Walker who happened to be a cabinet maker, and the two of them got together and they decided that they could make a living by selling what now you would call a file cabinet, into which you would suspend files with single sheets of paper instead of stacking these books. And they created the Shaw Walker Company. And he recalled being a little boy going with his grandfather on a horse pulled cart through the streets of Chicago selling this stuff. So you, you, you never know where these conversations are going to go. The one antithetical story I will share, my buddy from Chagrin Falls, Ohio, Reed McClellan, talked about walking into someone's office, big, massive mahogany desk, lovely burgundy leather chair that he was sitting in, and behind him, a picture that I would have loved of a schooner at a high rake in high seas, you know, obviously under severe weather conditions. And Reed goes, "Oh, are you a sailor?" And the gentleman immediately from the chair, from the desk, crossed his arms, leaned back, and said, "No, actually, I get violently seasick. I have that picture on the wall so that a-hole salespeople like you will ask me a question. Now, what do you want?"
Yeah.
It served to get him in the absolute worst mood
Oh,
ever.
yeah.
So
It's
you have to be careful. But I've been in offices when I was doing a study in Dallas, and on the wall were all these certificates from the Boy Scouts. And the gentleman, had been an avid volunteer, council member, etc. And that led to some real good conversations about
exactly
how he wanted to help young people.
because it needs to be sincere, right? You can't be a salesman. You can't see a picture of the 1972, Los Angeles Lakers up there and go, "Oh my God, I love basketball." No, no, no. But you can ask, you can say, "It's a fascinating picture. Tell me about it." And then that might lead to something. And oftentimes it can lead back to the not-for-profit. "Oh, it was in manufacturing. Has anybody ever told you the manufacturing program that our university has? Is that something you'd be interested in learning more about?" Right? The information, the data allows you to lead things in the right way more
And
often than not.
when one client asked about a particular piece of art, the elderly woman with whom they were visiting said, "Oh, you like that?" He said, "Yes, very much." "Well, let me show you my collection." And
Exactly.
so she exited. Turns out, in addition to the penthouse she owned the penthouse on the other side of the building and connected them through a hallway, walked down the hall and had a private collection of art that actually belonged in the museum. And that served as the predicate to how several visits later, donation of the artwork actually fostered the gift to the school.
I'll give you one more example of that, then we can get off the art thing. Um, I was at a family's house once, go in to wash my hands in the guest restroom, walk out and say, "Is that a Duchamp, an actual Marcel Duchamp?" Said, "Yes, it is." Said, "That's nude falling down staircase." "Yes." Said, "And it's in your bathroom?" "Yes." "I find it rather masochistic, and it was my husband's that he bought before we got married." Okay, it's a, $25 million painting. So you learn things about the people. Said, "All right, now I understand."
So there's a question up here relative to changes in giving patterns. I'm going to hold that because next month in April, one of the board members of the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, Lauren Sheehan, who's the president of Donor Perfect, will be joining our webinar and talking firsthand about the actual behavior trends that have been seen in 2025. So we'll get into that. And then in June, we'll have the Giving USA report. I'm on the editorial review board, and I've got my assignments now for the 2 chapters I'm to review. I can't tell you what they are or what the results are, but
And don't put them in AI.
yeah, don't put them in AI. But we'll be reviewing that at the end of June as well. Another question that came up. Um, this is self-serving, but the quote, the research you do is amazing. Is it something that us normal people can do, or can we have VPC do that for us, even if it's only for specific research?
Um, yes, with those tools and the sheets, you can do most of it. We've been doing it a long time, and I have subscriptions to pretty much every single database, there is. So you can do most of it. I don't know that I think it's probably best use of time for a researcher to always prepare whoever's going out on the call. So that's a good use of time to do a quick run through. I think it's critically important to refresh because again, this is fluid. Um, but also we're probably faster and maybe a little better at it. And it might be a good use. Yeah, I mean, it's what we do for a living.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so we would rarely turn down an opportunity to be of service. We have a mission to increase generosity in this country, and anything we can do that provides both insight to your own data set or leads you down some other avenues for additional lines of revenue, we're interested in helping you that way as well. Because um, although it didn't come up on the call, one of Jason's other areas of expertise is in real estate development and management. And if you couple that with opportunity zones and certain opportunities that exist in the world and in particular states, a philanthropist may in fact want to reinforce their giving
Yeah.
with a potential business opportunity, because the way they got wealthy in the first place was to spend less money than they made. And so getting a reasonable rate of return is something they're interested in doing. But we've been able to couple a social impact investment where somebody buys a piece of property or buys a building, renovates it, and then leases it to the nonprofit at a rate that's favorable to the nonprofit. They get a return on investment that's probably less than what they would get in a normal market situation, but there are also some tax incentives involved, and it's a win-win for
It's what
everyone.
it's win-win, and it goes into doing really good research,
Mhm.
knowing this person has huge capacity and it may not be them writing you a check. However, maybe since their family is involved in medical device equipment and you're building this new thing and you need this new piece of equipment, then that's the angle you go. The proper side in particular, knowing what they have, knowing that they sell stuff. You can create basically a modified REIT with new tax incentives, and it becomes a triple win, right? There's so many different ways to structure giving. It isn't just writing a check. There's
Mhm.
so many, and getting as much information as possible and asking the right questions and knowing that those opportunities are out there, not just thinking linear. Get a check, get a check, get a check. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great point.
And I remember working with a particular college doing the feasibility study, and one of the board members said to me, if I'm hearing you right, um, this campaign is going to go on for 5 years, correct? Yeah. And if you solicit somebody in year five, you're still going to give them 5 years to pay off their gift, right? So if it's like $1 million commitment or whatever, they could pay $200,000 a year. Yeah, absolutely. So basically, what you're telling me is I've got a 10-year window. So if I do a REIT in Las Vegas, with Las Vegas properties at that time were hot, if I do a partnership out there and I invest dollars, in 10 years, I'll have a balloon event and I could actually give you more then than I could right now, but you would take my commitment and I can pay it anywhere in that 10-year window. Yes. I said, I don't know if the advancement office is creative enough to consider that. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll go back to a mask. And I bet the
Exactly.
answer is yes. And that's exactly how we structured the gift.
I've got one of my high net worth clients that came to me and said this not-for-profit's, pressuring me to make this gift to buy this building. And it's not to buy the building, but to do an impact investment, right? They need this building. I'll get 4% return. They're giving me this whole pitch. Look at it. They send me the pro forma. They look at everything. I said, all right. I mean, it's high risk, but it's a really good cause. He said, but here's the deal. I can take $5 million and put it into a Schwab impact investment account. And I'm still doing an impact investment through Schwab, and I made 11% last year. So why? And I said, all right, then go back to the not-for-profit and tell them you'll take the $5 million, you're going to put it into the impact investment account, but you're going to take that 11% and you're going to assign whatever the returns are to the not-for-profit in perpetuity. And his response was, that's way too confusing for them. They just want the money. Okay. And he ended up not giving him any money because they couldn't make a case for why it made more sense. And if they had learned about him more and what he cared about, they could have said, yeah, you're not going to get as much money, but you're going to do more good and it's local and you care about local. They never made that connection. And it wasn't his job to do it.
Yeah, it's all when you come down to it, it's all mission, vision, and values. At the end of the day, when we said that over and over, there are so many clients that are concerned about the decline in government spending. Particularly if they're in certain areas for DEI support or some government function that was cut or reduced, and what we come back with is the people who care about you are interested in what you're doing.
Exactly.
So you've got to be able to state the case and show the impact and value you've had in the community, and make no qualms about it. Be bold and say, with X number of dollars, we can serve N number more children, or take so many more people off the streets, or help women that are experiencing abuse at home and give them a safe place.
I totally agree with you. I would couch it a little different. I would say, with X number of dollars, here is what your money will do.
Yeah, absolutely.
You will allow these many people to end being homeless. You will allow, right? But it's research.
All right. Well, we're at the end of our time. So, Jason, if you want to put up that last slide, I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with you. It's jason@visionaryphilanthropy.com. And we'd be delighted to entertain any additional comments or questions. And the other thing you should know is that this entire session has been recorded. Jason will edit the front and the end, so it's trimmed down and more presentable and polished. And as soon as we have that done, it'll get uploaded to our resources page on the website, visionaryphilanthropy.com, along with a copy of the slide deck. So you'll have both the video and the presentation. So, Jason, thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you to
everyone. It was my pleasure.
Stay tuned next week for Thursday, the 23rd of April, and we'll be talking about the Fundraising Effectiveness Project.